Beyond Reason Radio.
What is that you hear out there? Yes, it is not a mistake. It is a special 6 p.m. edition of Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We're on till 7 p.m. tonight. I don't get to say that very often. Special prime time, drive time edition of Beyond Reason Radio. We're on till 7 p.m. tonight right here on News Radio 93.1 WFLA. And if you miss any of the show, you can catch the podcast anywhere that podcasts are available. So one thing that is beyond reason, and by the way, we have Mr. Tom Benson who is producing tonight. As always, how are you, Tom?
I'm doing fine, and I was just thinking, I think anytime you're on when the sun is up is good.
Yes.
Normally it's like 8 o'clock in the evening. You know,
this
9
is true.
o'clock.
I'm not used to this. I'm like blinded by it back here. So one thing that is definitely beyond reason, Tom, is this hurricane, Hurricane Florence, which is still headed straight for North Carolina. Then it's going to kind of hang out on the coast and kind of go to South Carolina, which is just...
And get into Georgia a little bit more than they thought.
Yeah, I know. And you know what else is beyond? By the way, it's maximum sustained winds right now are 120 miles per hour. It's moving to the northwest at 16 miles per hour, headed right towards the Carolinas. They expect it to be a major Category 3 hurricane when it hits the Carolinas. Yeah. There have been millions of people evacuated from the coast, as they should be. Hopefully everyone is taking the evacuation orders seriously. We here in Florida know all about hurricanes and all about evacuation orders and all about the word that everyone hates to hear, hunker down. All about hunkering down. They are having to do that in the Carolinas. We know all about that, but our prayers are with them. But what's even more beyond reason about this hurricane is it is, of course, one more thing in today's society that we have made political.
Oh, of course.
Now hurricanes are political. You know, it used to be that, government and politics was political, and that was pretty much it. Not anymore. Hurricanes are political. Sports are political. Food is political. And so hurricanes, and what started a lot of this, there's a couple reasons why hurricanes are political. One is the debate over climate change.
Right. You have to go to the Church of Climate Change, yes.
Yes, and Al Gore is there at the pulpit preaching about it.
And passing the plate.
It's exactly right. That plate does get passed around in the Church of Climate Change. So that's a good point. But there are already articles out saying that this is more evidence of climate change. This is more evidence we have to take it more seriously, that Trump is not doing enough, that Republicans are responsible for hurricanes and death and all of this stuff. And it's interesting. I sent a text to a friend of mine of a link saying all this, and he goes, where was climate change from 2006 to 2017 when pretty much no major hurricane hit the United States in that time?
Yeah.
And, he said, I guess Obama protected us back then. President Obama was president, so he did stop. He said he was going to prevent the waters.
Yes.
From, he was going to cause the waters to recede. He stopped the hurricane.
He drew a line somewhere in the ocean.
My biggest problem, global warming, the theory really started in the 70s and 80s, and it was a scientific theory. And, of course, what happened is you had a scientific theory that was hijacked by politics and politicians who wanted to use it for power. My main problem with the whole climate change debate is everything can prove it. Everything. It's really the perfect political tool because you're talking about an invisible gas. So it's not like you go outside and see it. So you have to find ways to get people on board. So if it rains too much, it's because of climate change. If it rains too little, it's because of climate change. If there is a drought, it's because of climate change. If there is storm, if there's too much rain, if there's floods, it's because of climate change. If there's hurricanes, it's because it's climate change. If there's no hurricanes, it's because it's climate change. If it's cold, it's because of climate change. If it's warm, it's because of climate change, and so on and so forth. It's the perfect theory because everything can prove it.
Mm-hmm.
If things go back to normal, they will still find a way. They will say that's because of climate change.
Well, the climate does change from day to day.
Yeah, exactly.
But beyond 36 to 48 hours, except for a major hurricane, they pretty much, don't know until it gets there.
And of course, everything that the climate change people attack are the things that make this country prosperous. So our energy production, well, that has to be tamped down. Plastic, that has to be gotten rid of. Our cars, that has to be gotten rid of. Big business, that has to be attacked and taxed. So it's all the things that made us a great country that are conveniently the things that are attacked when it comes to climate change, which is very interesting. I don't want to get too much on that, but it's just amazing to me that today even hurricanes are political. And that's not the only way that hurricanes are political. Now we have because Trump is president, we have Trump involved in some kind of political controversy dealing with the hurricanes.
Mm-hmm.
So Trump tweeted out this, and he actually said this, I believe, when he was asked by a reporter. He said this multiple times, but he tweeted this out yesterday. He said, "We got A+ for our recent hurricane work in Texas and Florida and did an unappreciated great job in Puerto Rico, even though an inaccessible island with very poor electricity and a totally incompetent mayor of San Juan, we are ready for the big one that is coming." And then you had the San Juan mayor come out and the governor of Puerto Rico come out and criticize Trump for saying that, basically saying it was not a success. This shows that Trump is a failure. And then I've heard Trump say a couple of times, he says, "We are more ready than anyone has ever been ready for hurricanes," basically is what Trump has said.
Since the Civil War.
We are more ready. Like, why can't he just say we're prepared? Why can't he just say, hey, we're prepared? No, it's we are more ready than anyone has ever been ready in the history of being ready for hurricanes. And so now we have a political debate over hurricanes. And, to a point, I understand why Trump does this. Because ever since George W. Bush under Katrina, which George W. Bush got all the blame, even though it was really a lot of the local governments that deserved the blame for that.
Mm-hmm.
George W. Bush got all the blame, and it hurt him politically. And ever since then, you have Trump saying, well, if I don't constantly defend myself from these attacks, even dealing with hurricanes, the left is going to continue to bash the right for these things. And that's why Trump comes out and constantly has to over-defend himself because he knows the left's going to go after him no matter what he does. And that's why a lot of people support Trump, because he fights back. It's something I've talked about over and over again on this show, but that is another example of why Trump gets support.
Sure.
Because he's at least fighting back. He goes over the top in fighting back, but at least he is fighting back. So now we have a hurricane that's headed towards the Carolinas, and somehow we made this political. Interesting article by Damon Linker in theweek.com, which I just found like 10 minutes before the show, but I thought it was really interesting. The title of the article is "The Polarization of Hurricane Florence." And he's exactly right. He said, with Hurricane Florence bearing down on the eastern seaboard, it's a good time as any to take stock of the wondrous warping powers of partisanship which now touches and transforms absolutely everything in our public life. He says, even the weather. He says, listen for it as the storm approaches, strikes, and then dissipates, the ways that competing ideologies shape differing reactions to the event and expose the deepening political and cultural fissures in our profoundly divided country. And he goes on to different ideologies. And he basically says, for a Republican, a hurricane is an act of God. Storms happen. They kill people. If you live on the coast, it's part of the baseline risk of life, just as tornadoes regularly strike the Great Plains states, and everything from hellfire to mudslides to earthquakes plague the state of California. If you live in these places, you know what can happen. You can hope for luck or pray for divine protection, but in the end, it's out of your hands. There are no guarantees. When people get hurt by forces outside their control, then the government should step in and help with evacuations, rescues, and so on and so forth. He says, in the end, government can't protect people from fate. Bad things happen. That's life. The effort to insulate us entirely from such harmful events is not only futile, it also empowers the state which ends up oppressing us. But then he talks about how for a Democrat, the impending storm is completely different. It's not an act of God. It's part of, it's man's fault for creating climate change. And this means we have to give the government more and more power to do that. And he says the president considers Democrats to be his enemies. And in a country increasingly marked by tribalistic partisanship, that comes with consequences even when a storm strikes. So we live in such a polarized country right now when it comes to politics that even a hurricane that is headed for the Carolinas, which has happened in the past.
Sure.
There have been these strong hurricanes are not new. And originally it was that we were going to have more hurricanes. Remember that? We were going to have more hurricanes. Remember, this is Hurricane Florence. This is F. We've gone way past F in the past. So we haven't had a large number of hurricanes this season so far.
A year ago, we were past the I's already.
Yeah, exactly. So this stuff changes all the time. It's just so hard for me to believe that when you look at something like a hurricane, the nature of it, the power of it, and to think that man is somehow responsible for something so powerful and awe-inspiring is just, it's a little bit beyond my reach. Beyond reason. Yes, thank you. All right, but there's something else I want to talk about when we get back from the break, a really important subject. I got a tweet in from a listener. She actually called in when I was hosting for Bud on the Monday show. I got a tweet from a listener that said this, and she sort of asked this, and I didn't have enough time to answer the question on Monday's show when I was filling in, but she says this. She says, "Hey, Yaffee," says, "I've been listening to your radio for answers, but you haven't given it to me. What are conservatives doing for our working poor, disabled, and elderly living in a fixed income?" She says, "Trickle down isn't trickling." Now, she's a Democrat, she's a leftist, and this is a common thing I hear from leftists a lot, that, well, what does the GOP or what do conservatives do for the poor? What is their plan to help the poor and the downtrodden in our society? You hear this all the time. But I actually think this is an important thing to address again, because we're so focused on the attacks left versus right that I think sometimes it's good to step back and talk about why conservatism and belief in limited government is a good thing, even for the poor. So we're going to get to that in the next segment. We have much more to get to on the show today. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee. If you want to call, you can call in 407-916-5400, or you can text 23680, where standard message and data rates apply. Beyond Reason Radio. I'll be right back.
If you miss any of the show, you can download the Beyond Reason podcast on iTunes. The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
So I know a lot of you at this time, you like to get off work and then you go to the local restaurant or the local bar and you like to enjoy happy hour. Well, this is even better than happy hour. This is Yaffee hour because this is Beyond Reason Radio, special 6 p.m. edition here of Beyond Reason Radio. We're on until 7 p.m. right here on News Radio, News Radio 93.1 WFLA. We are moving from 102.5. If you're listening to us on 102.5 right now, what you want to do is change it to 93.1 because 102.5 is going away at the end of the month. Of course, you can still get us on AM 540. You can get us on 107.7 HD3. So a lot of you have HD radios in your car. You can get us on 107.7 HD3.
And the quality is excellent.
Oh, yeah. HD radio is pretty cool.
Yep.
And, of course, the quality is really good on iHeartRadio as well. So a lot of people have the apps in their dashboard nowadays. So you can just go to the iHeartRadio app in your dashboard and listen to us there. And by the way, if you're on the iHeartRadio app and you miss any of the show, you can catch the podcast of Beyond Reason Radio. Just search Beyond Reason Radio, and the podcasts are up there. So a lot of different options for you to get Yaffee Hour. So I wanted to address something that I did not get enough time to address on the show Monday morning. As you know, I produce the morning show, Good Morning Orlando with Bud. And I was filling in for Bud on Monday, and this person called in, And she sort of asked this, but later she found me on Twitter and asked the same question. This is what she said. She said, I've been listening to Radio for Answers for years, but haven't gotten any answers. It says, what are conservatives doing for our working poor, disabled and elderly living in a fixed income? Trickle down isn't trickling. Now, I don't think anything I say to this person is going to convince her differently. But I want to step back because I think this is an important question because this is a common theme when it comes to left versus right. There's a lot of people out there that don't like conservatives and don't like to vote for Republicans because they believe that Republicans and conservatives don't care about the poor. That the Republicans and conservatives don't want to do anything for the poor, the elderly, the disabled, so on and so forth. And then they go to the Democrats because not only do the Democrats say they care about the poor, but what the Democrats do is they say, we're the government and we're here to help. Reagan famously said that those are the scariest words in the human language. But the Democrats come out and they're constantly pushing programs that say, if you're poor, we're going to help you. And see, this is the problem with the premise of her question to begin with. Because the premise of her question isn't what do conservatives want to do for the poor. That's not really her question. Her question really is what are Republicans in government going to do for the poor? Her question is, how can the government help the poor? Because what she really wants is she wants more government programs to help the poor or help the sick and so on and so forth. That's why I'm sure she wants Medicare for all. She wants to increase Social Security benefits. She wants to increase welfare benefits. All of those different things. Probably wants guaranteed universal income at this point. And it's all, the basis is that the government has to step in and help these people. Here's one problem with the premise of that question. It will never be enough. It will never be enough. And this is where I have a lot of problems with questions like this. When you talk about helping the poor, define poor for me. Define poor. We sort of define a poverty line in income brackets. But the poor in this country have it better than most people in the history of human civilization. The poor in this country have a lot of benefits. A lot of them have electricity, they have air conditioning, they have food, they have ovens, microwaves, heat water, all of those different things.
Cell phones.
A lot of them have cell phones, they have entertainment beyond our wildest imaginations. And I'm not saying that it's not tough to not make a lot of money. Trust me, I know what it's like not to make a lot of money. But what I'm saying is it will never be enough. And I want to step back. So what do conservatives believe then really helps the poor? Well, instead of me answering this question, I found someone better to answer this question. And this is the famed economist Milton Friedman. He was a libertarian economist. I would definitely recommend his book, especially Free to Choose. And this is a video I found from him. This is from 1978. But he was asked about poverty. And he put it better than I could put it. And this is what he said.
So far as poverty is concerned, there has never in history been a more effective machine for eliminating poverty than the free enterprise system and the free market. The period in which you had the greatest improvement in the lot of the ordinary man was the period of the 19th and early 20th century. Those of us in this room are the heirs of that. We benefited from the way in which our parents and our grandparents were able to come here. And by virtue of the freedom that was offered to them, were able to make a better life for themselves and them and us. But next, if you look at the real problems of poverty and denial of freedom to people in this country, almost every single one of them is a result of government action and would be eliminated if you eliminated the bad government failures.
So this is how conservatives want to help the poor. The best thing that lifts more people out of poverty in the world, not just in the U.S., but in the entire world, in the history of the world, has been a free market capitalist system. The best thing that helps the poor in this country is the explosion of wealth and prosperity and innovation that comes from an unstifled capitalist system. And Republicans and conservatives, that is their agenda to help the poor, to get the government out of the way so the free market and capitalism can help expand prosperity in a country. There are a couple other things that help the poor as well. One, the civil society, fighting for a stable civil society, which comes from cultural moral values, the Christian, Judeo-Christian ethic, and family values also is a benefit that helps more people, lift more people out of poverty than anything. Moral values and the free market system, family values, and getting the government out of the way is how we help the poor. And also, of course, a strong military. We want a strong military so we don't have to worry about getting caught, having to defend ourselves, that we are so safe that we can focus on having a free, prosperous country. I want to talk more about this when we get back from the break. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you heart Beyond Reason Radio, listen to the Beyond Reason Radio podcast on iHeartRadio. Just download the iHeartRadio app and search Beyond Reason Radio. The conscience in your ear telling you the difference between right and wrong. Yaffee is back on the air.
Yes, this is, you heard right, this is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee. If you want, you can follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R, or like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. We're on Facebook Live as well. You can catch the Beyond Reason Radio podcast anywhere that podcasts are available. So on Monday, when I was filling in for Bud, I played some audio of Senator Ben Sasse. Now, a lot of you probably don't like Senator Ben Sasse because he was a never-Trumper. He's often very critical of Trump, although he has praised Trump for his court picks and for his tax cuts and for deregulation and for other things that Trump has done. But he's been critical of Trump and did not vote for Trump. But Senator Ben Sasse was on the Sunday shows over the weekend, and he said something that really fascinated me. And this got me down another road, but I wanted to play that again for a specific reason. So here it is. Here is Ben Sasse. This was on CNN State of the Union on Sunday.
Frankly, neither of these parties have a long-term vision for the future of the country. 10 years from now, where are we going to be in the future of work when young people are disrupted out of jobs 3 times a decade? Future of war and cyber, the collapse of community. There's massive stuff happening in America, and these parties are really pretty content to do 24-hour news cycles screaming at each other. The main thing that the Democrats are for is being anti-Republican and anti-Trump, and the main thing Republicans are for is being anti-Democrat and anti-CNN, and neither of these things are really worth getting out of bed in the morning for. I think we should be talking about where the country's going to be in 10 years. So I've been saying for a long time that these parties need to reform and have a future-focused vision, and we're not there yet.
So I talked about this a little bit earlier this week, and what this prompted was a caller from a listener and eventually a tweet from a listener who kind of agree, because I agree a lot with Ben Sasse. Both parties and both sides of the political aisle, left versus right, seem more focused on attacking the other side, which is why we elected Trump, for a big reason, because he attacks the other side very well. We're so focused on attacking the other side that we're not focused on what we stand for. And this prompted a tweet from a listener who is on the left, who says, what are conservatives doing for our working poor, disabled, and elderly living in a fixed income? And it prompted this because she kind of agrees. She doesn't know really what conservatives stand for. And I think because we have focused so much on attacking the media, attacking the other side, that sometimes it's good to step back and talk about why conservatism and limited government and constitutionalism is good for the country, including the poor. And I talked about in the last segment, and I played some Milton Friedman, what we do for the poor more than anything is we put forward policies that foster economic growth and economic prosperity. Because the best thing that can happen to get people out of poverty, there's a couple of things. a free market capitalist system that isn't too stifled by government intervention, a civil society that has a foundation in religious and family values, and a strong military. Those things put together will help the poor more than any other kind of government program. But Milton Friedman also makes the point that what happens a lot of times, because a lot of times Republicans are for stopping bad government programs. And the left sees that as you don't care about the poor. But actually, Milton Friedman has made the point, and Thomas Sowell and others have made the point in the past, that what happens is these government programs that are based on good intentions often hurt the poor more than help them. And that's what Republicans have to remind people of when they want to stop bad programs like Obamacare. A lot of people think, well, you just don't care about the sick. No, it's because those things hurt our healthcare system in the long run and don't help the sick. So I wanted to play another cut here from Milton Friedman. This is from 1978 when Milton Friedman was still alive. This is a libertarian economist. And he talked about specifically how government programs, government intervention actually hurts the poor and hurts minorities and hurts disabled sometimes more than it helps them. This is what he said.
Let me be precise and specific. Why do we have so high an unemployment rate among black teenagers? It's a disgrace and a scandal. Why do we have so high an unemployment rate? First of all, because we give them lousy schooling through governmental schools, which make them unqualified to hold decent jobs. And second of all, we require employers to discriminate against them by not hiring them unless their productivity is enough to justify a minimum wage. The minimum wage rate is the most anti-Negro law in the books. And it's an anti-Negro law because it precisely, having first not enabled the young blacks to have a decent schooling so that they can have productivity, we next deny them the on-the-job training that they might get if you can induce employers by being able to hire them for relatively low wages to give them on-the-job training that would make them qualify for higher payment and higher productivity. In the third place, we have constructed a governmental welfare scheme which has been a machine for producing poor people. We have induced people to come under control of welfare. I'm not blaming the people, don't misunderstand me. It's our fault for constructing so perverse and so ill-shaped a monster as the whole set of welfare programs we have under which we encourage people, families to break up. We encourage people to move from one part of the country and come to another, under which we have, in effect, made many people poor.
So one thing he talks about, especially at the end there, and this is fact. Stats show that one of the best things that you can give a child to prevent him from entering into poverty as he gets older is a father in the home. If there's a father in the home, it increases the chance of that child being successful later in life and decreases the chance of that child becoming a criminal or entering poverty. And the reason I bring that up is because it was a government welfare program, mostly in the inner cities, that mostly affected the black community, that hurt the chances of fathers being in the homes and has increased the rate of poverty in a lot of these families. And that's why that's why it's important that conservatives fight against bad government programs. And that's why we fight for free market capitalism and, of course, family values and a strong civil society based on the rule of law, the Constitution, and the Judeo-Christian ethic. I just wanted to point this out because she's right in one thing. A lot of times conservatives and Republicans don't say these things, and they need to say them. Otherwise, the left will take the narrative, and they will say, you just don't care about... And they're going to do this anyways for the most part, but at least you got to fight back. And you can fight back with these truths, because the left constantly says you don't care about the sick, you don't care about the poor, you don't care about the elderly, you don't care about the disabled. By the way, one of the ways the Trump administration has helped the disabled, many disabled in this country are military veterans. The military veterans were getting a bad deal with the Veterans Administration, the VA, the healthcare system. The Republicans and Trump put forward a plan that gives military veterans the option to go somewhere else if they're not getting the care they need in the VA. That's one way they help the disabled. Most of those people are disabled or they're elderly in the VA. So there's a plan right there. If you want to talk about the difference between conservatives and liberals and what conservatives want to do for the lowest in our society that need help, one of the best, another person, strong economist, Thomas Sowell, put this better than I ever could. By the way, I would read his books, Basic Economics. I've read that. There's another book, The Housing Boom and Bust, talked about the Great Recession. I read that. It's great. And he has a new book out called Discrimination and Disparities, which is excellent. I would definitely recommend that book as well. But he said this in a Fox interview a few years ago and was asked about the difference between liberal and conservative. And his answer was right on the money. Here it is.
They really are for helping. They're for helping people who are disadvantaged, as they put it. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think conservatives want to stop people from being disadvantaged. In other words, the liberals want to help the poor while they're poor, but really the biggest benefit is to stop them from being poor, and that they have very little interest in.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's like the best thing that you can give a person to get them out of poverty is a job, and a decent paying job. The best way you create jobs in this country is a free market system that isn't too stifled by government intervention. And he's saying the best thing, conservatives are for preventing people from becoming poor, getting people out of poverty, while liberals and Democrats are helping them while they're in poverty, which a lot of times just keeps them in poverty. Now, a great example of this debate now in today's political debate is what's going on between Bernie Sanders, the socialist Democrat from Vermont, who ran for president, and Jeff Bezos, who is the CEO of Amazon. So Bernie Sanders has been attacking Amazon and has been attacking Bezos because he says Bezos doesn't pay his employees enough and treats them badly, and he should pay them more. And then Bernie Sanders unveiled his Stop Bezos Act, which is a bill to force big companies like Amazon and Walmart to contribute to the cost of social services their low-wage workers use. Now, Bezos pointed out that most of the people who use those social services are part-time people, and that on average, Amazon workers make decent money. But I wanted to play some audio here. This is from just a couple hours ago. One of the founders of Home Depot, his name's Kenneth Langon. He was asked about this on Neil Cavuto's show. And he was asked about this whole thing between Sanders and Bezos, and does Amazon deserve to be attacked and all of that, and Walmart. And I thought his answer was right on. And this shows the benefits of a free market capitalist system based on competition and without too much government intervention, because a lot of times government intervention makes it worse. This is what he said.
I think it's a disgrace. Jeff Bezos has created jobs for a lot of people that they wouldn't have. Now, whether or not it's enough to qualify that, get food stamps, if that's the issue, right. This guy has done more, and he's done something else, big time. He's put pressure on guys like Home Depot to make sure we do our damnedest to give our customers exactly what they want. I tell people one of the best things that's happened to Home Depot is Amazon. They have made sure that we stay focused on offering our customers a variety of ways to shop in our stores, online, in person, a hybrid.
So he talked about there, and he said more even before that, was saying that Amazon has done more to create more jobs than most companies in the last, couple decades. But he also pointed out that by Amazon existing, it made Home Depot a better company because Home Depot had to compete against Amazon. And because they had to compete, they were able to provide better service and a better product to their customers. This is how capitalism works. This is why the free market capitalist system helps. And by the way, one thing that Bernie Sanders doesn't understand or doesn't get, he talks about employees at Walmart and employees on Amazon using food stamps and other things. Well, part of the reason they do that is because the food stamp system or the welfare system already exists. If we didn't have too much of a government safety net, Amazon would be forced to pay their employees more because those employees wouldn't be able to work there for those low wages. But they can get away with working there for low wages because those food stamps and those other welfare programs exist. So that's another example of how government intervention in the government welfare system can actually encourage the opposite, kind of like minimum wage, can encourage the opposite out of these companies instead of forcing them to pay more. But the best thing, I mean, you look at what the tax cuts have done. The tax cuts, we have small business optimism is higher than even when Reagan was in office. You have business investment is up, consumer confidence is up, and of course the GDP is up, and job growth is so high there are more jobs available than people able to fill them. This is a good thing, and wages are up. The last report showed that wages are up 2.9%. So, and this is one reason why I miss Reagan. When you go back and you listen to Reagan speeches, because Trump's good at attacking the other side, but Reagan was so good at articulating why conservatism works. And that's one thing Trump is not as good at. Trump is good at attacking the other side, maybe better than Reagan at that. But Reagan was so good at articulating why conservatism works. I do have one bone to pick when it comes to the Trump administration and something Mike Pence said. And we're going to get to that next. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Listen to the latest episodes of Beyond Reason. Download the podcast at Spreaker.com. Safe space for conservative thought, not for political correctness. Yaffee is back right now.
Yes, welcome back to the show. This is Orlando's Smart Talk Radio, a special edition of Beyond Reason Radio here on News Radio 93.1 WFLA. By the way, if you have not done so, I will be hosting an event at the AMC Theater at the Altamont Mall tomorrow. It's Gosnell the movie. There's going to be a Q&A session with me and one of the filmmakers, and then a free preview screening of the movie. If you have not done it so already, what you have to do is register. Go to our website, wflaorlando.com/contests, and you can register for the free movie screening. I will be there as well. Very important movie about a very controversial case dealing with an abortion doctor who was killing babies. So he was aborting babies illegally. Some of those babies were born alive, and then he killed them on the doctor's table because they were born alive. Sick stuff. Really, really nasty stuff. He was convicted of manslaughter as well. So I wanted to talk about one thing. I have a little bit of a bone to pick with Mike Pence. I love Mike Pence. Mike Pence was on Fox News Sunday over the weekend. And for the most part, he did a good job. He's trying to quell some of the fears that are coming out from the Woodward book and the New York Times op-ed, and that the Trump administration is in chaos and all of this other stuff. And by the way, I think the Trump administration was chaotic, mostly in the beginning. I think now it's not as chaotic because a lot of the people in there now are doing a good job. Woodward's book ends early in the spring. The timeline ends from the spring. So from the spring to now, that's not included in Woodward's book. So a lot of the chaos is gone now because he has better people in there. I think a lot of that has to do with Mike Pence, frankly. But Mike Pence said something here and talking about Obama taking credit for the economy. And I have to have bone to pick with him on one little thing. This is what he said.
We inherited an economy that was growing a little bit more than 1%. In the last quarter, our economy is growing at 4.2%, 4 million new jobs, unemployment at a 50-year low. And to have President Obama come out and tout his policies that resulted in less than 2% growth, which saw tax increases, Obamacare regulation, and a doubling of the national debt, I think it was very disappointing. But frankly, I think it just illuminates the choice the American people have in the midterm elections.
So he's right about everything he said there, except for the fact that I don't think you can criticize Obama for doubling the national debt when your administration is also doing nothing to tackle the deficits and the debt. You really have no room to criticize Obama for that. You should criticize Obama for that. We all should. The Democrats and Republicans at that time increased the national debt, like you said, doubled it in like 10 years. That's way too much. That's a big problem. And now all of a sudden the Republicans don't seem to care about it. It's growing even more. This is according to The Hill. The federal deficit has soared 32% in the last year to $895 billion. It hit $895 billion in the first 11 months of fiscal 2018. That's an increase of $222 billion, or 32% over the same period the previous year. It's according to the CBO. The nonpartisan CBO reported that the central drivers of the increasing deficit were the Republican tax law and the bipartisan agreement to increase spending. Now, a lot of people are blaming the tax cuts on this. Maybe the tax cuts are partly responsible. I don't think so, and this is why. This is according to the same report. Revenue rose 1% in the last year. They say it only rose 1%. But even after the Republican tax cuts, which were big tax cuts, especially the corporate tax cut, government revenues still went up under a tax cut. That shows that the economic growth that are fueled by the tax cuts have helped government revenue. Now they're going to say, oh, maybe it wouldn't have went up as much. That's hard to tell, but the fact is government revenue is still going up. We're still getting more this year than we got last year. So why is the deficit so much higher? Why is the debt so much higher? Well, spending went up 7% in the last year. The biggest problem we have in this country that's increasing to the debt still, even under a Republican president and a Republican Congress, is not the tax cuts. What the problem really is coming from is government spending. And unfortunately, with the entitlement spending and Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, which is really the biggest problem that's going to come from of the national debt, you have a president and a Congress who really don't want to touch it. They don't want to deal with it. And you want to talk about helping the disabled or helping the poor. If Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid go away, that will definitely hurt those on a fixed income. But you're going to have to cut those benefits if we don't deal with this problem with the debt right now. So I have a bone to pick with them. They used to care about the debt, and obviously they don't care about it anymore. The economy's good, so they're just ignoring it. You can't ignore it because it is going to be a problem. All right, I appreciate you listening to the show tonight. It was a special edition of Beyond Reason Radio. I liked being here when the sun was still up. If you missed any of the show, you can catch the podcast anywhere that podcasts are available. Just go on the iHeartRadio app. You can like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. You can follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R. I have to thank Mr. Tom Benson for producing tonight and joining the show. And, well, I will catch you guys next time.